Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In the previous episode, we started to discuss the life of Stefan Karbonski, a World War II leader of the Polish People's Party, which was the strongest political party in Poland between 1945 and 1947. We left the previous episode discussing Karbonski's participation in the 1918 to 1919 Polish-Ukrainian War and the ensuing Polish-Soviet War. In May 1921, a third conflict would start and Karbonski would be there to fight as well.
There was another conflict that broke out. Karbonski was there too. Where else would he be? He decided to volunteer to fight in the Third Silesian Uprising of 1921, which finally settled the Polish-German border in the west. Having fought intensely in these years, in all these conflicts, he remained very involved in politics in the 1920s and 30s. He graduated from the university in Poznań, from the Faculty of Law, which set him on track for a career in politics. He had been engaged with the PSL, the Polish Agrarian Party, even earlier, but by the 1930s he started rising through the ranks, and in 1936 he became the party's leader in the region of Białystok in northeastern Poland. By the time of the German invasion in 1939, Karbonski, I guess inspired by his youthful days, again took to arms, fought against the Germans, was captured, but managed to escape. Instead, he would be one of the men who played an important role in this underground state that the Polish resistance built, which had both its military component and its civilian political component. Karbonski was involved in the civilian component. He was put in the so-called political steering committee, which was a body that where all the political parties cooperated and formed this underground type of a government of unity and an underground parliament. There he was given the role of civilian resistance, included schooling, but he also decided to set up civilian courts that were underground, that were settling civil cases that the Germans would never find out about. But he also set up courts that would sentence people that somehow cooperated with the Germans. So he increasingly became more and more involved with the military component of the underground state as well. He was also responsible for sending out the information to the Polish government in exile about the persecution of Jews in Poland by the German Nazis. The first information that reached the Polish government in exile in London had been compiled by Karbonski himself, who had gathered all the necessary intelligence. By the time of the Warsaw Uprising, he was in Warsaw. He managed to blend in with the civilian population and leave the city without being arrested. Instead, unfortunately, a year later, in 1945, the NKVD, the secret police of the Soviet Union, rolled in together with the Red Army into Poland, returned, and Karbonski was arrested as one of the leaders of the Polish underground state. He didn't spend a lot of time in prison, only a couple of months before he was released. The Soviets, they wanted to play this game that I mentioned earlier, where they would try to form a government of unity, an interim government, together with the Polish political forces that were independent from the communists. They tried to create some kind of facade that we aren't introducing dictatorship straight away. We will have democratic elections, but first we need this interim government and cooperation between us communists and the representatives of the Polish nation. Naturally, the election of 1947 was falsified. As I mentioned previously, also the prime minister of the government in exile in London, Stanisław Mikolajczyk, had been lured back to Poland, where he had been given the impression that there could be any point in cooperating with the communists for creating this government or not government in exile, but the government of unity that was supposed to salvage any kind of chances of some kind of Polish independence. It wouldn't happen. Korboński was made aware that he was just days away from a second arrest and again ending up in an NKVD prison, something he didn't really look forward to.
Not at all.
Instead, he and his wife were able to escape through Sweden and to the US. In that escape, as I mentioned earlier, Jerzy Śmiechowski, the man who ended up in that prison, the Stalinist prison, together with the daughter of Antoni Pajdak, played an instrumental role. Once Korboński arrived in the US, he made a career as a journalist, became a member of the International Pen Club, and was very involved in Polish diaspora affairs in the US throughout the Cold War. Unfortunately, he died from a brain aneurysm in 1989 in Washington, and it was unfortunately the same year that Poland would have elections in the summer, the first partly free elections, not completely free, but at least by then it was becoming increasingly likely that Poland was moving in the direction of democracy and independence. But unfortunately, Korboński died before that election took place. And yet again, another man who his entire life was, at the age of 17, he started fighting for Poland as it regained independence, and throughout the interwar era, throughout the Second World War, and then decades in exile, were dedicated to the Polish cause of independence, but never lived to see it, unfortunately.
Well, that's a fascinating story. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
There we have it, another fascinating story of a man who spent his adult life fighting for Polish independence and died just at the moment his dream came true. That's the sort of exciting story we try and find for you on Poland Daily History. Thank you for watching, and do join us again next time.